The Millionaire's reunion. The Los Angeles shopping mall was buzzing that Saturday afternoon. Families, couples, and groups of friends strolled from store to store under bright lights, accompanied by the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and buttery popcorn. David Blake, a tall man with sandy hair and a sharp gaze, moved leisurely through the crowd. He wore an expensive suit, a testament to his success, and held a cup of coffee in one hand while rolling through his phone with the other. To the world, David was the epitome of wealth and success, self-made millionaire at 46, but beneath his polished exterior lay an emptiness, void that even his affluence couldn't fill. Close the deal and have the paperwork on my desk by Monday. David spoke into the phone before ending the call. He sighed, slipped his phone into his pocket, and took a sip of his coffee. As he looked around the mall, his eyes caught a familiar figure in the distance, a woman, her deep brown skin radiant and her curly hair falling gracefully to her shoulders, was walking with two teenage boys. They were laughing and pointing at the jewelry store display. David froze, his heart skipping beat. It was Olivia Grant, the woman David had walked away from 15 years ago, leaving only a note in their modest Los Angeles apartment. He remembered the words as if they were carved into his mind. "I need more from life than you can give me." He had thought leaving was necessary, that it was the only way to chase the heights he dreamed of, and yet here she was looking even more beautiful, her expression filled with a grace and maturity he hadn't seen before. David's gaze shifted to the two teenage boys beside her, his breath caught in his throat. The boys had his eyes, the same intense green that stared back at him from the mirror every morning. Their features, their expressions, he could see himself in them. Could they be his sons? Had Olivia been pregnant when he left? He had never considered that possibility. Overwhelmed by a mix of disbelief and a strange hope, David found himself stepping toward them. Each step felt heavy as memories of the past rushed back, colliding with the present reality. He wanted to say something, anything, but the words were lost in the turmoil of emotions within him. As he moved closer, Olivia looked up. Their eyes met. She froze, her smile fading, and her body tensed for a moment. The world around them seemed to dissolve, leaving just the two of them in that suspended instant. "David," she murmured, her voice laced with shock and something else, an undercurrent of anger and disbelief. "Olivia," David began, but his voice was barely more than a whisper. He didn't know what to say. He glanced at the boy, who had now noticed their mother's sudden change in demeanor, and turned to look at him, puzzled. Olivia raised a hand, her eyes sharp and guarded. "I don't believe it. After all these years," she spoke softly, her voice trembling. The boys, sensing the tension, exchanged looks. "What do you want, David?" Her words were direct, cold, masking a hurt that had clearly not faded. David's eyes flickered to the teenagers. They were staring at him, confusion in their eyes. He cleared his throat, attempting to speak. "Olivia, I didn't know," he stammered, his gaze falling briefly to the boys. "I didn't know about them." Olivia shook her head, her eyes narrowing as she took a deep breath. "How could you have known, David? You left without a word, without even looking back. I was pregnant, and you walked away as if we were nothing." David winced, shame rushing through him. He had been so determined to escape what he saw as a simple, confining life. He had convinced himself that he was doing the right thing by leaving. Now, faced with the reality of what he had abandoned, his justifications seemed hollow. The boys, clearly unsure of what was happening, looked to their mother for an explanation. Olivia took another breath, her voice strained but softening as she addressed her children. "Boys, go ahead into the door. I'll be with you in a moment." They hesitated, but eventually nodded, casting glances at David before walking off. As they disappeared, Olivia turned back to David, her composure cracking slightly. "What are you doing here, David? You can't just show up and expect everything to be okay. You left, we moved on. She paused, her voice breaking. "They don't even know you. They don't need you." David swallowed hard, fighting the urge to reach out to her. "I know I can't take back what I did, but please, Olivia, just give me a chance to explain." I've made mistakes, but if there's any way I can be part of their lives, I want to try. I need to try. Olivia looked at him for a long time, her eyes filled with hurt and something else, perhaps a flicker of the love they once shared. She shook her head, her voice softening but remaining firm. You don't get to just walk back into their lives, David. You don't get to pretend that the last 13 years didn't happen. We're fine without you. David nodded, tears stinging the corners of his eyes. He had expected this, the rejection, the pain. But he had hoped for a chance, even a small one. I understand, but if there's any way, if they ever want to know me, I'll be here. I'll wait. Olivia's expression softened just slightly, and she sighed. I'll think about it. But understand this, David, this isn't for you, it's for them. If they want to meet you, I won't stop them. But I'm not making any promises. With that, she turned and walked away, her shoulders straight, her head held high. David stood there watching as Olivia rejoined the boys, wrapping her arms around their shoulders as they walked away. He felt an overwhelming emptiness mixed with fragile sliver of hope. It wasn't much, but it was something. Days passed and David could think of nothing else. He replayed the encounter over and over in his mind. The look in Olivia's eyes, the confusion on the boys' faces, the realization of what he had missed. Had built a life filled with wealth and power, but he had walked away from the one thing that could have given his life real meaning. A week later, his phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but something told him to answer it. Hello, David. It was Olivia. Her voice was calm, but there was an edge to it. The boys, they want to meet you. They have questions. David's heart raced. Thank you, Olivia. I don't know what to say. Don't thank me, she said curtly. I'm doing this for them, not for you. If you hurt them, David, I won't forgive you. I understand, he replied, his voice thick with emotion. I promise I won't. That Saturday, David found himself at a small cafe near Griffith Park. He arrived early, his nerves making it impossible to stay. Still, he ordered a coffee and waited, his mind filled with anticipation and fear. When he saw Olivia approaching with the boys, he stood up, his heart pounding. David, Olivia said as they reached him. Her expression guarded. The boys stood beside her, looking at him with curious eyes. David managed his voice barely steady. He looked at each of them, trying to memorize every detail. I'm David. I'm your father. The boys exchanged glances. In one of them, the taller one spoke first. I'm Ethan, he said, his voice cautious. And this is my brother Noah. Noah gave a small nod, his expression unreadable. Why did you leave? He asked bluntly, his eyes locking onto David's. David took a deep breath, the question cutting through him. I was selfish, he said, his voice breaking. I thought I needed more success, more freedom. I thought leaving was the only way to get it, but I was wrong. I know that now. Ethan looked at him, his gaze softening slightly. Mom said you left because you didn't want us. Is that true? David shook his head quickly, his eyes filling with tears. No, I didn't know about you. If I had, maybe things would have been different. I can't change what I did, but I'd like to try to make it right if you let me. The boys were silent for a long time. Finally, Noah spoke, his voice quieter now. Maybe we'll see. David nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. I'll be here whenever you want. I'm not going anywhere. A little. We'll take it one step at a time, she said. But remember, David, this is about them, not about you. David smiled, his heart swelling with hope. I know. Thank you, Olivia. And thank you, Ethan. Noah, for giving me a chance. They sat down, and for the first time, David felt like maybe, just maybe, he could find his way back to the family he had once abandoned. It wouldn't be easy, and he knew it would take time. But as he looked at his sons, he felt something he hadn't felt in years, a sense of purpose, belonging, and that was worth everything. Over the next few weeks, David began to meet Ethan and Noah regularly. It started slowly. A coffee here, a lunch there. The boys guarded at first, their questions cautious, their expressions unreadable. But David was patient, answering everything honestly, even when the truth was painful. One afternoon they went to a small park. Ethan brought soccer ball, and the three of them ended up kicking it around. It was awkward at first, David wasn't sure how much space to take, how much enthusiasm to show, but then Noah laughed, genuine carefree laugh, as David tripped over the ball and attention broke. They spent hours playing, and by the end, David felt a warmth he hadn't known in years. It was as if for a moment they were just a father and his sons without the weight of the past hanging over them. Olivia watched from a distance, sitting on a bench, her eyes following them as they played. When they were done, she approached, her face softening as she saw Ethan and Noah smiling. "Thank you for today," she said to David, her voice quiet. "They needed this." David nodded, his eyes meeting hers. "So did I," he replied honestly. He hesitated, then added, "I know I can't fix everything, Olivia, but I'm not going anywhere not." This time, Olivia studied him for a moment before nodding. "We'll see, David. Just keep showing up. That's all they need." And David did. He showed up for every game, every school event, every small moment that he could. Slowly the walls began to come down. Ethan started sharing more about school, about his love for history, and his dream of becoming an architect. Noah opened up about his